Maya Torres was 22 years old when she made the biggest mistake of her life. She asked a question. The Interstellar Naval Academy on Titan Station was not a place for questions. It was a place for following orders. It was a place for keeping your head down and doing what you were told. Maya had known this from the first day she arrived. But she had never been good at staying quiet. She had grown up on a small colony ship traveling between Earth and Mars. Her parents were engineers who fixed broken machines and kept the ship running. They had taught her to look at problems and find solutions. They had taught her to notice things that other people missed. They had never taught her to be afraid of asking why the academy was different from anything she had known before. It was huge, built into the side of a mountain on Titan, Saturn's largest moon. Over 10,000 cadets lived and trained there, learning to be officers in humanity's expanding fleet. The hallways were long and cold. The instructors were strict and demanding. Everything ran on schedules and rules. Maya did well in their classes. She was smart and worked hard. Her scores in navigation and tactical training were among the best in her year. Her instructors said she had a bright future ahead of her. But they also wrote notes in her file that she did not know about. Notes that said she asked too many questions. Notes that said she did not accept answers easily. Notes that marked her as a potential problem. The trouble started on a Tuesday evening in her 3rd month at the academy. Maya was walking back to her dormitory after a late study session. She took a wrong turn and found herself in a corridor she had never seen before. The lights were dim here. The walls were older, made of a different metal than the rest of the station. At the end of the corridor was a large door with a red warning light above it. The sign said restricted area in bold letters. Maya should have turned around and left. Instead, she stood there and looked at the door. She noticed that the floor in front of it was worn smooth, as if many feet had walked there over many years. She noticed that the air felt different here, warmer and carrying a faint smell of chemicals. She made a mental note and went back to her dormitory. Over the next few weeks, Maya started paying attention to things she had ignored before. She looked at the station maps and found that the corridor she had discovered was not marked on any of them. She checked the power usage reports that cadets had access to and saw that the eastern section of the academy used 3 times more energy than it should. She listened to conversations in the mess hall and noticed that certain topics made people go quiet. She asked her roommate, a girl named Patricia Marino, if she knew anything about the restricted areas. Patricia's face went pale. She told Maya to stop asking questions. She said that people who asked questions about certain things had a way of disappearing. Maya should have listened. She did not. One morning, she raised her hand in Commander Vance's tactical theory class. Commander Vance was a tall man with gray hair and cold blue eyes. He had been at the academy for over 30 years. Everyone was afraid of him. Maya asked why the eastern wing of the academy was sealed off. She asked why the power readings did not match the official station layout. She asked what had happened to the cadets who had left the academy in the middle of the semester. The classroom went silent. Every other cadet stared at their desks, afraid to look up. Commander Vance stood very still for a long moment. Then he smiled. It was not a friendly smile. It was the kind of smile a predator makes before it strikes. He told Maya that her curiosity was admirable but misplaced. He said that some questions were above her rank and understanding. He said that she would learn in time to focus on what mattered. That evening, Maya received her new assignment. She was being transferred to night watch in the archive wing. 12-hour shifts from 8 in the evening to 8 in the morning. She would work alone. The assignment was indefinite. Her friends told her it was a punishment. The archive wing was the oldest part of the station, built when Titan was first colonized over 200 years ago. Nobody went there except the cleaning robots and the occasional technician. There was nothing to do except sit at a security desk and watch. Empty corridors on old monitors. Maya reported for her first shift on a Friday night. The archive wing was even worse than she had expected. The lights flickered. The heating system barely worked. The air smelled of dust and old plastic. Her security station was a small desk in a corner, surrounded by monitors that showed gray images of storage rooms and hallways. She sat down and looked at the screens. Row after row of metal containers filled with data chips and old documents. Nothing moved. Nothing happened. She understood now why this assignment was considered the end of a career. There was nothing here. Just forgotten junk from a forgotten time. But Maya was not the kind of person who gave up easily. If they wanted her to sit in the dark and do nothing, she would find something to do. She started by exploring her workstation. The computer was old, but still functional. She had access to the security systems for the archive wing, which meant she could see power readings, temperature sensors, and maintenance logs. She began reading through the records, looking for anything interesting. By her third night, she found something. The power usage in the archive wing spiked every 4 hours, exactly on schedule. The spikes were massive, enough energy to run a small ship. But according to the official records, there was nothing in the archive wing that needed that much power. Maya checked the floor plans. The power was being drawn from somewhere below her, from a sublevel that was not supposed to exist. She leaned back in her chair and looked at the ceiling. Commander Vance had sent her here to bury her. He had sent her to a place where no one would listen to her questions, and no one would care what she found. He had made a mistake. Maya Torres smiled in the dark. She had work to do. Maya spent the next 2 weeks learning everything she could about the archive wing. She studied the old blueprints. She read through maintenance logs going back 50 years. She tracked the power spikes and wrote down the exact times they happened. She was building a picture, piece by piece, of something that was supposed to stay hidden. The power surges came every 4 hours without fail. They lasted exactly 17 minutes each time. Whatever was drawing that energy was running on a precise schedule, like a machine following a program. Maya calculated the total power usage and realized it was enough to keep 100 people alive in cryogenic sleep. She thought about that number often as she sat alone at her desk. 100 people, hidden beneath her feet, frozen and forgotten. On her 15th night of duty, she met Danny Orozco. Danny was a maintenance technician assigned to the archive wing. He was in his late 50s, with gray hair and tired eyes. He walked with a slight limp from an old injury. When Maya first saw him, he was pushing a cart of tools down one of the dark corridors, checking ventilation systems that nobody else bothered to inspect. She said, "Hello." He nodded and kept walking. Over the next few nights, she saw him several more times. He never talked much. He did his work quietly and efficiently, then disappeared into parts of the wing that Maya could not access. She noticed that he always seemed to know exactly where to go, even in corridors that were not on any map she had found. One night, Maya was studying her notes at her desk when Danny appeared beside her. She had not heard him approach. He looked at the papers spread out in front of her, at the numbers and diagrams and questions she had written down. His face showed no surprise. He asked her how long she had been tracking the power usage. Maya told him 2 weeks. He nodded slowly. Then he asked if she wanted to know where the power was going. Maya felt her heart beat faster. She said yes. Danny looked at her for a long moment, as if he was deciding something important. Then he told her to follow him. They walked through the archive wing, past rows of storage containers and locked doors. Danny moved with purpose, taking turns that seemed random but clearly were not. They reached a section of corridor that looked exactly like every other section. Gray walls and flickering lights and the smell of old metal. Danny stopped at a blank wall panel. He pressed his hand against it in a specific pattern. 5 touches in quick succession. The wall made a soft clicking sound. A hidden door slid open, revealing a narrow stairwell that went down into darkness. Maya looked at Danny. He told her that she could turn back now and forget what she had seen. He said that once she went down those stairs, her life would never be the same. He said he was giving her a choice that no one had given him. Maya did not hesitate. She walked through the door and started down the stairs. The stairwell went down 3 levels. The air grew colder with each step. The walls changed from metal to concrete, then to something older, rock that had been carved out when Titan was first settled. This place was ancient, though before the academy even existed. At the bottom of the stairs was another door. Danny entered a code, and it opened. Maya stepped through and stopped breathing. The room was enormous, stretching out so far that she could not see the walls. Rows of cryogenic pods filled the space, hundreds of them, maybe thousands. Each pod was a metal cylinder with a small window on top. Through the windows, she could see faces. Human faces. Men and women and young people, all frozen in sleep. She walked forward slowly, looking at the pods one by one. The faces were peaceful, eyes closed, skin pale from the cold. Some of the pods looked new, clean, and shining. Others were old, covered in frost and dust. Danny walked beside her. He explained what she was seeing. These were the disappeared, he said. Cadets who had washed out of the academy under mysterious circumstances. Officers who had asked the wrong questions. Scientists who had discovered things they should not have discovered. All of them had been declared dead or transferred or dismissed. Their families had been told lies. Their records had been erased, but they were not dead. They were here, frozen, stored like equipment in a warehouse. Maya asked why. Why keep them alive? Why not simply kill them? Danny said that some of them were too valuable to waste. Scientists with knowledge that might be useful someday. Officers with skills that could not be easily replaced. The people who ran this place kept them as resources to be thought out and used when needed. Maya felt sick. She looked at the rows of pods stretching into the distance and tried to count them. She gave up after a few minutes. There were too many. She asked Danny how he knew about this place. He told her his story. 30 years ago, he had been a researcher at the academy, studying the history of human expansion into space. He had found old records that mentioned this facility, back when it was used for legitimate medical research. He had started asking questions. He had been caught. They had given him a choice. He could join the Frozen and be stored away forever. Or he could spend the rest of his life working in the archive wing, keeping his mouth shut and pretending he knew nothing. He had chosen to live. He had spent 30 years walking past this place every day, knowing what was down here, unable to do anything about it. Maya asked why he was showing her now. Danny looked at her with something in his eyes that might have been hope. He said he was old and tired. He said he had watched too many people disappear into the ice. He said that Maya reminded him of himself when he was young, before fear had made him small. He wanted her to know the truth. What she did with it was her choice. Maya stood in the cold room, surrounded by the frozen dead who were not dead. She thought about Commander Vance and his cold smile. She thought about her parents on their colony ship, fixing broken things and making them work again. She thought about the kind of person she wanted to be. Maya turned to Danny and said she was not going to pretend she had not seen this. She said she was going to find out who was responsible and make them answer for what they had done. Danny nodded slowly. He said he had hoped she would say that. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small data chip. He'd been collecting information for 30 years, he said. Everything he knew about the Frozen, about the people who ran this operation, about the secrets hidden beneath the academy. He gave the chip to Maya. She took it and put it in her pocket. She looked one more time at the rows of sleeping faces. Then she turned and walked back up the stairs, into the dark archive wing where she would spend the rest of the night planning what to do next. The game had changed. Maya Torres was no longer just a curious cadet asking questions. She was a threat. Maya spent every free moment studying the data chip Danny had given her. She could not do it at her security station, where cameras might catch her. She could not do it in her dormitory, where her roommate Patricia might see. She found a broken storage room deep in the archive wing, disconnected its security camera, and turned it into her secret office. The chip contained 30 years of records, names, dates, documents. Danny had been careful and patient, collecting one piece at a time, building a picture of something terrible. The academy was not what it seemed to be. On the surface, it trained officers for humanity's fleet. Thousands of young people came here every year to learn navigation, tactics, engineering, and leadership. Most of them graduated and went on to serve in the Navy. They never knew about the darkness underneath, but some cadets were different. The instructors watched everyone, grading not just their skills but their personalities. They looked for certain traits: independent thinking, strong moral beliefs, the willingness to question orders that seemed wrong, the courage to speak up when something was not right. These traits made good leaders. They also made dangerous people, at least in the eyes of those who ran the academy. Cadets who showed these traits were marked. A note went into their file. They were watched more closely. If they kept showing the wrong kind of thinking, they were moved to the next level of concern. Some were pushed out through normal means: failed tests, disciplinary problems, family emergencies that required them to leave. These cadets went home thinking they had simply not been good enough. Others were not so lucky. The ones who saw too much or asked too many questions were handled differently. They disappeared. Their families received messages saying they had died in training accidents or been transferred to distant postings. Their records were changed. Their friends were discouraged from asking questions, and some of them ended up in the ice, frozen beneath the archive wing, waiting for a day when they might be useful again. Maya found her own name in the files. She had been flagged after her second week at the academy, when she had corrected an instructor who had made a mistake in a lecture. The note said she showed resistance to authority and unwillingness to accept established procedures. She was marked as someone to watch. Her question to Commander Vance about the sealed wing had moved her to the highest level of concern. According to the schedule in Danny's files, she was supposed to be collected within the next 3 weeks. Collected was their word for freezing someone. Maya read that note and felt cold fear in her stomach. But the fear did not make her want to run. It made her angry. She kept reading. The people who ran this operation were not the normal academy leadership. The instructors and administrators took orders from someone higher up. Danny's files mentioned a group called the Council, but he had never been able to learn much about them. They seemed to exist outside the normal military structure, pulling strings from the shadows. What Danny had learned was that the Council believed humanity needed to be controlled. They thought that freethinkers and questioners were dangerous to the stability of human civilization. They saw themselves as protectors, removing threats before they could cause problems. The frozen were their failures and their resources. Scientists who had discovered inconvenient truths. Officers who had refused to follow immoral orders. Cadets who had shown too much potential for independent thought. All of them stored away, kept on ice in case their skills might be useful someday. Some had been thawed out over the years. Danny's files showed records of revivals, followed by something called reconditioning. The details were vague, but Maya understood enough. They broke people down and rebuilt them, turning free thinkers into obedient tools. Maya closed the file and sat in the dark for a long time. She thought about her parents. They were simple people who fixed broken things. They had never wanted power or control. They just wanted to do good work and raise their daughter to be a decent person. She thought about the cadets sleeping in their dormitories above her, dreaming of becoming officers and exploring the stars. Most of them would never know about the Frozen. Most of them would serve their whole careers without ever learning the truth. She thought about the faces in the pods. Each one had been a person with hopes and dreams and people who loved them. Each one had been brave enough to think for themselves. And that bravery had cost them everything. Maya made her decision. She could not save herself by running away. Even if she escaped to the outer colonies, the council would probably find her eventually. And even if they did not, she would spend the rest of her life knowing what she knew, doing nothing about it. That was not the kind of life she wanted. She started making a plan. The first step was finding allies. Danny was too old and too afraid to do much more than provide information. Maya needed people who were younger, stronger, and willing to take risks. She thought about the Frozen. Some of them had been stored for only a few years. Their skills would still be sharp. Their anger would still be fresh. If she could wake them up, she would have allies who had nothing to lose and everything to gain. The revival process was in Danny's files. It was complicated, but not impossible. The pods were designed to be opened from the outside. The people inside could be brought back to consciousness with the right medical treatment. Maya started studying the procedures. She memorized the steps. She made lists of the equipment she would need and figured out where to find it. In the Academy's medical supplies. She also started choosing which Frozen to wake first. She looked for people with useful skills. Scientists who understood the station systems. Officers who knew how to lead. Cadets who had been frozen recently enough that they would still be sharp. One name stood out from the others. Grace Delgado. She had been an intelligence officer 15 years ago. Her crime was discovering the Council's existence and trying to expose them. She had been frozen before she could tell anyone what she knew. According to her file, Grace knew the station's computer systems better than anyone alive. She had written some of the security programs that protected the Academy's secrets. If anyone could help Maya take down the Council, it was her. Maya marked Grace as the first priority. She looked at the calendar. 3 weeks until her scheduled collection date. 3 weeks to wake up enough Frozen to make a difference. 3 weeks to plan something that had never been done before. It was not much time. It would have to be enough. Maya Torres put away her notes, hid the data chip, and went back to her security station. She watched the empty corridors on her monitors and waited for her shift to end. Above her, the Academy slept peacefully, unaware that something was about to change. Below her, the Frozen waited in their pods, dreaming of nothing. And in between, Maya sat alone in the dark, planning a revolution. Maya started with Lily Vega. Lily was 19 years old when they froze her. She had been a cadet for only 8 months, one of the best in her class. Her crime was refusing to change a report. There had been a training accident that killed another cadet. The instructors wanted Lily to write that it was the dead cadet's fault. Lily had seen what really happened. She knew the equipment had been faulty and that the Academy was to blame. She refused to lie. They gave her one more chance to change her mind. She refused again. 2 days later, her family received a message saying she had died in a shuttle crash. Her body was never recovered. Her friends were told not to ask questions. That was 2 years ago. Lily had been sleeping in the ice ever since. Maya chose her first because she was young and strong and had been frozen for the shortest time. Her body would recover faster than the others. And Maya thought that Lily, of all people, would understand why this fight needed to be fought. The revival took 6 hours. Maya worked alone in the cold room beneath the archive wing. following the procedures she had memorized from Danny's files. She attached monitors to Lily's pod. She started the warming process slowly, raising the temperature degree by degree. She prepared the drugs that would restart Lily's heart and clear the cryogenic chemicals from her blood. Danny stood watch at the top of the stairs, ready to warn Maya if anyone came. He was terrified. His hand shook every time he checked the corridor, but he stayed at his post. 30 years of silence had taken something from him, and this was his way of getting it back. When Lily finally opened her eyes, she screamed. Maya was ready for that. She held Lily's hands and talked to her in a calm voice, explaining where she was and what had happened. She told Lily that 2 years had passed. She told her that her family thought she was dead. She told her about the Frozen and the Council and everything she had learned. Lily cried for a long time. Then she got angry. Then she asked what they were gonna do. Maya smiled. She had chosen well. Over the next 2 weeks, they woke 12 more people. They worked in secret, always during Maya's night shifts, always with Danny keeping watch. The process got easier each time. They learned which drugs worked best. They learned how to calm the newly awakened and help them understand their situation. Each person they woke had a different story. A scientist named Carlos Mendez, who had discovered that the Academy was testing dangerous drugs on cadets. An engineer named Sophie Lynn, who had tried to report unsafe conditions in the station's reactor. A young officer named Kevin Park, who had refused to carry out an order that would have killed innocent civilians. All of them had done the right thing. All of them had been punished for it. All of them were ready to fight back. The most important revival was Grace Delgado. Grace had been frozen for 15 years. She was older than the others, in her 40s, when they took her. The long sleep had been hard on her body. She needed 2 extra days of recovery before she could even sit up. But her mind was as sharp as ever. When Maya explained the situation, Grace listened without interrupting. She asked questions that showed she understood more than Maya had told her. She had been intelligence once, and she still knew how to put pieces together. Grace told Maya something that changed everything. Before they froze her, she had hidden a copy of her files about the Council. She had buried it deep in the station's computer systems, in a place where no one would think to look. If that copy was still there, it would contain enough evidence to bring down the entire operation. Maya asked if she could find it. Grace said she could, if they could get her access to a computer terminal with the right clearances. They had 2 problems. First, getting Grace into a secure area of the Academy without being caught. Second, finding a terminal with high enough access to reach the hidden files. Sophie Lynn, the engineer, solved the first problem. She knew the maintenance tunnels that ran through the station. Some of them connected to areas that were supposed to be off limits. She could guide Grace through the tunnels and get her close to the command center. Carlos Mendez, the scientist, solved the second problem. He had studied the station's security systems before they froze him. He knew that the medical wing had emergency terminals with commander-level access in case of a crisis that required quick decisions. Those terminals were less protected than the ones in the command center. They made their plan. Grace would go through the tunnels to the medical wing. Carlos would disable the security cameras along her route. Sophie would guide her through the maintenance passages. Maya would stay in the archive wing and keep watch on the station's security feeds. If anything went wrong, they would all be caught. They would all be frozen or worse. There would be no second chances. The night of the mission, Maya sat at her security station and watched her screens. Her hands were steady, but her heart was racing. Somewhere in the walls of the station, Grace was crawling through dark tunnels toward a computer that might save them all. An hour passed. Then, too, Maya saw security patrols moving through the corridors, following their normal routes. She watched Carlos working on a control panel, pretending to repair it while actually disabling the cameras one by one. At 2 in the morning, Grace reached the medical wing. Maya could not see her on the cameras because Carlos had done his job. She could only wait and hope. 30 minutes later, her communication device buzzed. It was Sophie, sending a single word. Success. Grace had found her files. More than that, she had found files that had been added since her freezing. 15 years of additional evidence about the council and their crimes. She had copied everything onto a portable drive and was making her way back through the tunnels. Maya felt tears in her eyes. They had done it. They had the evidence they needed done. Now, they just had to figure out how to use it. Grace returned to the sublevel an hour before dawn. She was exhausted and dirty from crawling through maintenance passages, but she was smiling. She held up the drive like a trophy. They gathered in the cold room among the sleeping pods. All 13 of the awakened plus Maya and Danny. Grace connected the drive to a portable screen and showed them what she had found. It was everything. Names of council members. Records of every person who had been frozen. Documents showing how decisions were made about who to target. Communications between the council and its agents throughout human space. The evidence was overwhelming. If they could get it to the right people, the council would be finished. But who were the right people? The normal military chain of command was compromised. The council had agents everywhere. They could not simply send the files to the authorities and hope for the best. Maya thought about it for a long time. Then she remembered something from her classes. The Academy's annual evaluation ceremony was coming up in 1 week. Every important officer and official in the Titan system would be there. News crews would broadcast the event across all the colonies. If they could hijack that broadcast, they could show the evidence to everyone at once. The council would not be able to suppress it. The truth would be out before they could stop it. Grace said it was possible. She could write a program that would take over the station's communication systems and broadcast whatever they wanted. They started planning. They had 1 week to prepare. 1 week to save themselves and everyone else the council had ever hurt. Maya looked at the faces of her allies. These people who had been stolen from their lives and frozen in the dark. They had every reason to be bitter and afraid. Instead, they were ready to fight. She felt something she had not felt since her first day at the Academy. She felt hope. The annual evaluation ceremony was the biggest event of the year at the Academy. Admirals and politicians came from across the solar system. News cameras broadcast the speeches and award presentations to every human colony. It was a celebration of everything the Academy stood for. This year, it would be something very different. Maya and her team spent the week preparing. Grace worked day and night on the program that would hijack the station's broadcast systems. Sophie mapped out every route through the maintenance tunnels that they might need. Carlos prepared medical supplies in case anyone got hurt. The others trained in hand-to-hand combat in case things got violent. They knew the risks. If they failed, they would all be frozen or killed. The council would cover up what had happened, and the truth would stay buried forever. Everything depended on getting the broadcast right. Danny was the most nervous of all. He had spent 30 years being afraid. Now he was watching young people risk their lives to do what he had never had the courage to do. He did not know whether to feel proud or ashamed. Maya told him he had already done more than he knew. Without his 30 years of patient record keeping, none of this would be possible. His silence had not been weakness. It had been survival. And survival had given them the weapon they needed to win. The night before the ceremony, they held a final meeting in the cold room among the pods. 13 people who had been stolen from their lives, plus Maya and Danny. They went over the plan one more time. At exactly 10 in the evening, the ceremony would begin. At 10:30, the Admiral would give his opening speech. At 10:45, Grace would activate her program and take over the broadcast. The evidence would appear on every screen on Titan Station, and every screen watching the broadcast across human space. Videos of the frozen in their pods. Documents showing who had authorized the freezing. Communications between council members discussing who to target and why. At 11 o'clock, Maya and the Awakened would walk into the ceremony hall. They would stand before the admirals and politicians and news cameras, living proof of what had been done. The council would try to stop them. Security would be called. There might be fighting. But by then, the truth would already be out. Millions of people would have seen the evidence. The council could not silence them all. Maya asked if anyone wanted to change their mind. No one did. They slept a few hours in the archive wing, taking turns keeping watch. Maya dreamed of her parents on their colony ship, fixing broken things. She dreamed of the faces in the pods, waiting to be freed. She woke up at 9 in the evening. It was time. The ceremony hall was in the central section of the academy, a huge room with a domed ceiling and walls decorated with flags from every human colony. Over 2,000 people were gathered there, officers in dress uniforms, politicians in expensive suits, news crews with cameras pointing at the stage. Commander Vance was there, sitting in the front row. Maya recognized several other instructors who had marked cadets for collection. She saw faces she did not know, older men and women who carried themselves with quiet authority. Council members, she guessed. The people who had been running this operation for generations. None of them knew what was coming. At 10:30, Admiral Patricia Wong took the stage. She was a small woman with gray hair and a hard face. Her speech was about tradition and excellence, about the Academy's role in shaping humanity's future. The audience applauded politely. Maya watched from a maintenance corridor behind the stage, looking through a small window. Her heart was pounding. In 15 minutes, everything would change. At 10:42, Grace sent a signal. The program was ready. 3 minutes to go. At 10:45, exactly, the screens changed. The Admiral's face disappeared. In its place was a video of the cold room beneath the archive wing. Rows of pods. Frozen faces. A voice, Grace's voice, explaining what the audience was seeing. The ceremony hall went silent. Then it erupted in chaos. People were shouting, pointing at the screens. Security officers were running toward the stage. The Admiral was demanding to know what was happening. Commander Vance was on his feet, his face white with shock. The broadcast continued. Documents appeared on the screens, showing orders to freeze specific individuals. Communications between council members discussing how to handle problems. Lists of names, hundreds of them. People who had been declared dead, but were actually sleeping in the ice. Maya did not wait any longer. She walked out of the maintenance corridor and onto the stage. Behind her came the Awakened. Lily Vega, Grace Delgado, Carlos Mendez, Sophie Lin, Kevin Park. All 13 of them walking in a line, their faces lit by the screens, showing the evidence of what had been done to them. The crowd fell silent again. News cameras swung toward the stage, capturing everything. Maya walked to the center of the stage. She looked out at the audience, at the admirals and politicians who had believed in the institution they served, at the news crews who were broadcasting this moment to every corner of human space. She spoke clearly, so everyone could hear. She said her name was Maya Torres. She said she was a cadet at this academy. She said she had been assigned to night watch in the archive wing because she asked too many questions. She said the people standing behind her were supposed to be dead. Their families had been told they died in accidents or were transferred to distant places. But they were not dead. They had been frozen and stored like equipment, punished for thinking for themselves and doing what was right. She said there was a group called the Council that had been running this operation for generations. They believed that controlling humanity's best and brightest was necessary for stability. They believed that free thinking was dangerous. She said they were wrong. The evidence was on the screens. The awakened were standing on the stage. The truth was out, and it could not be put back. Maya asked the audience a simple question. What kind of humanity did they want to build among the stars? One based on fear and control? Or one based on trust and freedom? The answer came not from the admirals or the politicians. It came from the cadets in the back of the hall, the young men and women who had come to the academy believing in its ideals. They stood up, one by one, and walked toward the stage. They came to stand with Maya and the awakened. Hundreds of them. Then the junior officers joined them. Then the enlisted personnel who had been working the ceremony. The council members tried to reach the exits. They found their paths blocked by the people they had tried to control. Commander Vance stood alone in the front row, surrounded by empty seats. His cold smile was gone. He looked old and afraid. Maya walked down from the stage and stood in front of him. She did not say anything. She did not need to. His world had ended, and he knew it. Security took the council members into custody that night. Investigations began immediately. Over the following months, the frozen were revived one by one and returned to families who had thought they were lost forever. Maya was offered many things. A promotion, a command of her own, a medal for bravery. She turned them all down. Instead, she asked for a job in the Academy's new oversight division. Someone needed to make sure this never happened again. Someone needed to watch the watchers, to ask the uncomfortable questions, to protect the cadets who thought for themselves. She had been punished for her curiosity once. Now that curiosity would be her purpose. Years later, people would ask Maya what she had learned from her experience. She always gave the same answer. She said that humanity's greatest strength was not its technology or its military power. It was the simple fact that some people would always choose to do the right thing, even when it cost them everything. The Academy had tried to freeze that quality out of existence. They had failed. They would always fail, because that quality was not a weakness to be eliminated. It was the best thing about being human. And no amount of ice could ever kill it.